Thank you.
Thanks. Hey everyone, thanks for coming to watch my talk on 21st century war stories. Big thanks to BSIdes to have me back. I was here last year doing a talk with Dave Hardy on interactive PowerShell sessions with Metasploit. I've tried to make this talk for everyone, so it's not really aimed at it's not just aimed at the social engineering enthusiasts, but also the professional red teamer. If you've got any questions, I'd love to answer them at the end or over a beer later. So the talk's going to run a little bit like this. We're going to talk a bit about open source intelligence gathering, reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is probably one of the most important parts of any penetration test or red team. The foundation of great success, in my opinion. Talking about the current tooling in the industry, infiltration, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Persistence, so once you've got inside a network, how you can stay inside a network reliably, any lateral movement that you might need to do, and then acting on your objectives. Then I'm going to introduce a tool that we've written at Netitude called Powershell C2 and do a live demo. So who am I? So my name's Ben Turner, and for those of you who don't know, I'm a penetration tester and red teamer for Netitude. This is me before, during, and after a beer. I've been through the Crest Team Leader exams and I've done a fair amount of IT health checks, which I think sets a good foundation for red teaming. Gives you a good experience on all different types of infrastructure and endpoints, and a good general understanding of sort of different network topologies, firewall rules, and infrastructure. As of late, most of my focus has been around red teaming and SE and STAR, which have also held the STAR Simulated Attack Specialist exam now for 2 years. Also, not just a full-time hacking nerd, do like riding motorbikes, skiing, which apparently is not boarding, but hey, I love it. Flying drones and traveling, try not to combine the two, and I work for Netitude. Bit of a disclaimer about the presentation. So it reflects real life experiences and observations of me. However, some of the customer sensitive information has been redacted for the client confidentiality. So what is 21st century hacking? So 21st century hacking is an amalgamation of social engineering, red teaming, STAR, and CBEST. It's the most cutting edge and realistic of all the assurance services. It brings a mix of skill sets and team members in order to achieve an objective. It includes things like physical SE, USB drops, spear phishing, telephone calls, telephone social engineering, hacking, and other stuff as well. It's free from caveated auth forms. No hackers would be constrained like this, so why should we put those constraints on us as well? And in my opinion, if you're not waking up at 3 a.m. to check you've still got a shell inside that organization, you haven't really experienced red teaming. What I tend not to class red teaming as is blowing the doors off a building and access computer systems that way. That's more of a military analogy, and I don't think we're quite at that level yet. Although I'd quite enjoy to do that. I think the UK is slightly behind the curve. Been over to the US a little bit to do some conferences over there, and they seem to be doing red teaming all the time. I think the introduction of sort of CBEST has started to get people like learning about red teaming, and it's getting a lot more and more, but I think UK is slightly behind the curve here a bit. So basically, in a nutshell, when people ask me sort of, why should we do red teaming on top of all the normal penetration testing and assurance services, I got this quite good little story. We were over in the Middle East, we were hacking a bank. They do a lot of VA, vulnerability analysis, and pen testing of their own. They've got their own internal pen test team. So they employed us, and they said, well, to be honest, we don't think you're going to get in. We're pretty good. And we were like, oh, crap. They obviously do quite a bit of assurance services. Anyway, so they said, right, okay, do what you need to do. This is our bank. This is our layout. This is our ATM machines, blah, blah, blah. Do what you need to do. Okay, so we thought, well, we'll try and attack the ATM machines. Not really done an awful lot on ATM machines myself, but treat it as any normal network and try and hack it. So this is the ATM machine. The pictures kind of speak for themselves. So in one of the ATM machines inside a mall, we did have security guards by us, by the way, just in case. But this is the back of the ATM machine. Outside the ATM machine, this was the lock that had already been ripped off. It was actually built on wood, which is quite interesting, so it pretty much just pushed off. And as you can see, there's a Cisco router hanging out the back of it. So we thought, right, okay, well, it's probably over a 3G WAN or something like that. It's going to be all locked down. The ports are going to be securely configured, so we can't just plug in and see anything. No, we were wrong. So when we plugged in, didn't actually give us DHCP, which is fine. Was able to ARP spoof the network, see what it was about, plug in, give myself an IP address, see what the default gateway was, add the default gateway, start hacking the ATM. The ATM was quite firewalled, but you could see all the traffic. You'd do man-in-the-middle attacks to see what the traffic was happening. I could see it was going over the network, over the 3G, 4G LAN back to the core network. So I asked the guy who was with me, I said, what's your domain controller for your network? And he said, it's on this. I was like, okay, well, you won't be able to get here, so don't worry, blah, blah, blah. RDP'd straight onto the domain controller. I was like, from in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a mall, I can get onto your ATM network by just plugging in at the back, give myself an IP and RDPing onto your domain controller. This is what red teaming is. This was another example, pretty much same place. In the Middle East, they have these like little things outside the malls. It's basically just little air-conned rooms, and they have their own self-sufficient kiosks and ATM machines. Another example, this is the cupboard that all the network infrastructure was placed in. Literally, it was just ripped open. This was 2 examples. They even put the IP address and default gateway and everything for me. So that one was even easier. All this could have been done anonymously as well, because you could have just basically wore a hoodie, walk in there, plug in, put a wireless access point in, walk out, and do all this remotely. And you can have access to their full internal infrastructure. Really quite scary stuff. So everything we do when we do pen testing and red teaming, we map it back to the cyber attack chain. This includes the reconnaissance phase, the delivery phase, exploitation, pivoting, and then acting on your objectives. So everything in this presentation will hopefully map back to either one of these phases. So understanding the cyber threat is quite important, and it gives the ability to provide risk at the board level. So you want to know what the threats are to your organization, and this is where sort of threat intelligence reports come in, and it plays a big role into what we do. I won't go too much into threat intelligence because that's obviously a talk in itself. But for me, when I'm doing a red teaming engagement, I want to know the threat actor that they want me to mimic. That's kind of the most important for me. Each threat actor has different capabilities. So if they're telling me they want me to act like a nation state, I need to behave differently. So it ranges from sort of script kiddies or lone wolves, which have not much capability at all. It's easy to fingerprint, detect, and respond, whereas nation state is completely opposite. It's got significant capability in funds. It's got custom cryptography, protocol multiplexing, anti-detection, and 0 days and things like that. So they're really hard to fingerprint, detect, and to respond to. So the reconnaissance stage, recon's the most important really, and I can't stress that enough to anyone. It's the foundation of great success, and I like to live by the analogy, proper planning prevents piss-poor performance. Most importantly, the more you can find out about your target environment, the better you can hack it, the better you can weaponize your payloads, communications, to be able to hack it in a better way and to not get detected, basically. Some of the things that I tend to use for doing the reconnaissance stages are Maltego. It sort of finds a lot of things on the internet that you might not necessarily be able to find just by doing normal Google hacking and things like that. DNS reconnaissance is really important. I'll come on to that in a second. Even things like whois records can give you key personnel inside the organization that you might want to target. Other things you can use are media, newsletters, forums, and white papers. Social networking is obviously a really good one for accessing people's information and people who work at that organization and what they do and what roles they do. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram also same sort of thing. GitHub searching, that's another great one. Recently we've seen a lot of information stored on GitHub, and just like not even private GitHub, so you can just search the GitHub, find the private keys, passwords, and they're often an exact replica of the organization's sort of application or anything. So it's always worth looking on GitHub just for things like that, even though you would have thought, oh, that organization won't use that type of thing, but people just put stuff on GitHub. Google Maps is quite good as well when you're doing physical SE, so just finding out where they're located, dropping that person on the map and seeing where you can go. Another great one is previous breaches, so we often use this quite a lot. Have I been pwned is also quite a good one that links off from this. But just looking at all the different people in the organization and using the domain name as a start point to look in the Adobe breach, Gmail breach, LinkedIn, and that'll give you a great start point or at least a few email addresses to use before you do the social engineering. Also the Showdown API. If you put your customer's name in the Showdown API, it'll often give you a vast amount of information about what they've got exposed on the internet. And then also just coming back to just normal search engine Google searching. So I was doing a job recently, And they said they weren't very security aware, so I was like, okay, no problem. We're doing a remote sort of red teaming type of approach. We were going to do some social engineering against them. Because they said they didn't have much security implemented, we were like, okay, that's fine, no worries. But actually doing a bit of a reverse lookup, they were using Mimecast. And for those of you who don't know, Mimecast is like a mail security gateway, and it's actually really quite good. It's got a lot of protections in place. But one thing I've learned from doing the red teaming I've done is that Mimecast, unless they've got the threat portal, which replaces all the links within the emails. If you send an attachment, so a document with a macro or something, then you're probably not likely to get in. But if you send someone maybe a link to an attachment which is hosted on an internet, then that's probably the best bet. So just having this kind of information, just from DNS, is really valuable before you attack your organization. So if you're doing sort of social engineering or spear phishing campaigns against an organization, you need to know the domain, obviously, that you're targeting and the format. But once you've got that information, tools such as Prowl are really quite good. So Prowl just searches LinkedIn for all the people it knows about against that organization, and it'll come back and give you a nice formatted list of email addresses to use for your spear phishing campaign. Simply email, the Harvester, Maltego, these all do that sort of thing, but we've found that Prowl does probably the best effort at this. Also previous breaches, because that can just give you a massive list of email addresses to use. And not all of them are still valid, but I'd say 2/3 generally are. So this is an example of Prowl. It's actually a guy from Netitude who wrote this, and it's really good. It basically just gives you the guy's name and what their role is within the organization. And it even now maps against have I been pwned, so it'll give you all the list of email addresses for the organization, and it'll say, oh, this one's already been in the Adobe breach. So then you can cross-reference that, and again, with the Adobe breach, you sometimes can get the password back. The password isn't in there, it is encrypted, or encoded, should I say, but they have passwords that have been reversed. And what I would say is when you target an organization, think about what your objective is of this whole test. So are you going to go after their core application server, or are you going to go after their banking application? Because this might basically save you a bit of time once you're in. So if you know you're going after that certain banking application, LinkedIn might say these 3 guys here already work on that application. So this is a great way of basically finding that information out before you go in. So you don't have to do much lateral movement once you're in. So it's good to know your terminology when you're talking to the client, or just generally, because there's a bit of a difference between spam, phishing, and spoofing. So spam is unsolicited bulk email or messages irrespective of content, usually like bulk advertising, that sort of thing. Whereas phishing is a type of spam, but it's purely intended to trick the user into entering credentials or sensitive information with the intent to commit fraud or identity theft. Whereas spoofing is the forgery of email headers so that the message appears to come from someone else rather than the actual source. So what I've been doing recently, people who haven't probably got things like Mimecast, is I've had quite a lot of success with spoofing emails. So not necessarily spoofing it from like Microsoft or anywhere like that, because that's where stuff like SPF comes in, but actually spoofing it from themselves. So if you're targeting a bank on like examplebank.com, actually spoofing from them. So using the whoever records to find out who the network admin is, and then spoofing from him to the rest of the company. And sometimes this is just allowed in because the way the mail gateway is set up. So it's worth testing this out before you even try sort of creating your own domains and things like that, because I've had a lot of success with it. And also one thing to know about, if you can do that, you're actually from a trusted domain. So anything that you send, like hyperlinks or images, it'll automatically get downloaded in Outlook. So it's definitely worth testing before you do this type of engagement. So the current tooling out there that I've found that I use in red teaming, Metasploit obviously is probably the biggest and best open source penetration testing framework. I wouldn't say it's specifically ideal for red teaming because it's quite noisy and it's not very stealthy. It's been signatured by a lot of IDS and IPS products. The reverse HTTPS has come on a long way. It's now got some set timeouts and sleep options, so you can almost use it as a beacon. But I still wouldn't say it's full-on end-to-end a very good red teaming tool. It's got some great SOX proxying capabilities, so that's tend to what I use Metasploit for. So not necessarily use it to get in or get the initial foothold, but if I want to sort of use it for RDP and SOX lateral movement, that's what I use it for, and I'll show you a bit of this later. Empire, so it's been quite big. It's been out just over a year now, I think. It's a really neat product. I have had some issues with it, so I've tested it in quite a lot of environments, and there has been a few issues where it wouldn't go through proxies. So most of the people I test are quite high-profile clients, so they generally have quite a good secure configuration and everything's proxied, and it's failed a couple of times. So I've been a bit worried about using it. You've got to have confidence in your tools. So then I sort of revert back to Metasploit, but again, then you're at risk of being caught because it's quite noisy. Cobalt Strike, so that's a very solid red teaming tool. It's really good. It's quite expensive. If red teaming is not your core sort of function within the organization, then getting the buy-in to have that per license is probably quite expensive. And then there's Powershell C2, which I'll come on to a bit later, but this is a free tool that we've written to help with this kind of thing. Everything that I talk about in here has been simplified to be used in that. When you're doing this engagement, you've got to note as well that when you're doing sort of social engineering, that sort of spear phishing, you're really only going to get one shot, so you've got to be really, really reliable, use a really reliable tool that you know is going to get in. So I've been doing this probably about 18 months now, and I've had a pretty much 100% success rate, so every job I've done where we've done red teaming, we've kind of got in one way or another. I think the success factors for us are basically just testing the tools that we're using proxy-aware payloads. Basically, if you aim to infiltrate the most secure environment, then if it's less secure, then it's a winner. So always aim for the most secure. Don't go out on ports like 8080 because they're not by default allowed out on proxy. So always go out on port 80 or 443. Make sure your traffic's encrypted, that sort of thing. One of the ways we've still been getting in with VBA macros. So it's amazing, VBA macros have been around a long time, and people have been using this for social engineering, spear phishing for ages. But it's amazing how often people still require VBA, so they won't disable it. It's really easy to implement trusted locations with macros with group policy, but people still don't tend to do it. So sending in macros has probably been, the most used that I would have used. Also documents with OLE objects in, so you can even add executables and things like that in Word and Office. Java jar files, I tend to use these quite a lot as well, but I would always sign them. Unsigned Java files is pretty much a no-go, because by default on Java, high only allows signed applets. So it's fairly easy, well I say fairly easy, you can get a signed code signing certificate, but I'll talk about that a bit later. Hypertext HTML applications. Again, these are quite good for getting inside an organization. However, I wouldn't be, most Outlook will block these because I'll see it as an executable. But if you host it and then send a link to it, these are ways that you actually bypass these sort of filters. Quite a few recent ones are zip files. So in a zip file, you can actually have an LNK file, which links off to something like PowerShell. When they just double-click the link file and open the shortcut, it just runs PowerShell. So that's another good way. And click once, so this is really quite powerful as well. So integrating PowerShell or standalone executable into a click once application. So send them a link sort of saying, oh, come visit this site, you get 10% discount. And when they click OK, then it pops up like a click once, which is all signed. And they all feel quite fuzzy because it's got a nice little padlock. And then they end up clicking. Site cloning, again, if you just after sort of credentials, because they've got a lot of single-factor systems on the internet, then site cloning might be the way to go. I've had a lot of success with just pure brute force single-factor systems on the internet. So using stuff like the Adobe breach to get the list of email addresses and then trying maybe password 1, January 16, these type of things against it. Only probably once or twice because the lockout's probably going to be 3. But we've had a lot of success. I had one recently which was against Citrix. So Citrix was on the internet. I looked at it, and it said it was two-factor authentication. So I thought, oh, probably not even much point trying to brute force this. But I thought, oh, what the hell? I've got a list. I've got a password. I'll give it a go. So I brute forced about 150 users with, I think it was Welcome One or something like that. And basically, I was able to get in on the internet, even though it said it was two-factor. So even though it says it's two-factor, you still have to put each person in the group for two-factor authentication. So you might find one that isn't. So it's always worth a go. This person, luckily for me, had access to some pretty sensitive information. There was a nice folder called Credit Card Shared Data, which was like, oh, that looks juicy. 25,000 clear text PAN numbers. Which was quite nice, hanging on the internet of a Citrix server. Not sure how they got away with it in terms of PCI, but there we go. So just trying things like a brute force attempt against systems that should be single or shouldn't be single factor is always worth a go. But again, be quite careful. Don't lock out things. Make sure you only try one attempt and be quite stealthy if you are trying to be stealthy. One of the most important things is increasing the trustworthiness of your links, of your spear phishing campaigns. And the ways you can do that is buying stuff like code signing certs, which I've talked about. So when you're sending in a Java payload or a code signing cert, or a click once application, if it's signed, again, you get the nice green padlock and everyone feels warm and fuzzy. Also, if you're sort of sending in CVs, things like that, where you need a telephone number, why don't you just purchase some burner phones from somewhere so you can actually legitimize it a bit more and put your telephone and mobile number so they think, oh, there's a mobile number that must be safe. Registering new companies, so we often register quite a lot of different new companies when we're attacking an organization. Even sometimes if it's like Example Bank, we'll buy Example Bank Group or something like that. So these type of things, people just see the bank in the title and then go, oh yeah, that must be safe. Let's Encrypt, which is free, so if you're making any websites or any site cloning, that's all free, so you can get free SSL certificate for 90 days, I think. And also then, yeah, try using very similar domains. So as I said before, the default on Java is high, so if you are using Java, make sure you use code signing cert, like here, so it pops up and doesn't show any red errors and stuff. Another one which is quite interesting recently is site email reputation. So again, I'm attacking quite high-profile clients, so they have quite good web proxy gateway filters, which probably have quite a lot of threat feeds which come from like known sources, and they say these are good, these are bad. They block unwanted categories like hacking, things like that, Gmail, webmail, that sort of thing. So when we're creating these sites on the fly, maybe like a week before, these aren't going to work. So what we've been having to do now is actually create sites, 6 months, 12 months in advance of doing a test, so that we can build up some reputation, just like basic e-commerce sites that just sell, I don't know, random books or something, so that at least they get a decent category and they're sort of permitted through WebSense and things like that. I'd never use direct IP addresses for C2 traffic, because that instantly will just come up as a big red herring within any sort of filtering system. Also, in the early days, we tried to use dynamic DNS, and again, this is quite a no-no, and this is quite easily blocked or sort of disabled on sort of WebSense and things like that. So I'd steer clear of that. So site cloning, we often target a group or users via site cloning just for getting credentials. Even if they're using 2FA, you can sometimes basically add the step within the site clone. So this is us. We've created a site clone of their Citrix system, which did have 2FA. Well, it didn't in the previous one, but it is meant to. So to do it legitimately, we created another one. We site cloned, sent a link saying, oh, we've just upgraded the Citrix server. Can everyone try and log in? And with some nice jQuery, which I'm not very good at, but I got a guy to help me. Basically, you can offload whatever he sends back to like your own web server log. So it'll literally pass to me creds, the username, the password, and the PIN. And at that point, you've probably got about 60 seconds to use them credentials legitimately on their website. And then especially if you create a nice link, so when they press log on, it does actually bypass them back to the failed logon attempt of the legitimate site. So then they log in a second time, and by that point you've already logged in, and then they log in and they think nothing's wrong. So this is just another good way of doing site cloning without raising suspicion. And once you're on inside a Citrix environment, it's pretty perfect from a red teaming perspective, because I think 99% of all Citrix environments you can break out of to some sort of PowerShell or command prompt. So I think I'll show you that a bit later. So it's a really good thing to get onto from a red teaming perspective. So when doing this type of engagement, we provide the client with some analytical data. So a lot of management like graphs, as you probably all know. It's kind of management porn in their eyes. And I like to add so to get this information, I add 3 stages in my sort of spear phishing campaign. So inside the email that I send, I'll add a webbug, and the webbug will have something like 1.png. So when I've sent when I've sent my first phase in, if they download the image, I'll get a log with a unique reference on my Apache web server, and I know that person's downloaded it. So at that point, everyone's got a unique reference. So if I send 10 emails in and I get 10 unique references hit my web server, I know that every one of them has at least opened that. And then if I've sent a sort of a document or something like that in with it, I will add something like 2.png when they open the document. So at that point, then I'll know that they've opened my email, 2, they've opened the attachment, and then 3, if my exploit's been successful, I'll obviously get a shell. So then I can give a nice graph to say how many emails were sent, how many emails were opened, how many documents were opened, and how many hosts are compromised. So this is just a really nice graph to send back to the client at the end of the engagement. So UNC paths, Neil Lyons did quite a good talk on it at SteelCon. I think he's doing another talk soon as well. But UNC paths are really quite interesting. It's been around for donkey's years, but no one's really used it in the social engineering capacity. So we found, so you can embed basically HTML obviously within an email, and you can send it. And if you send an image source, for example, with a UNC path, and if someone opens that, inside a normal organization with tight egress filtering controls, this isn't going to do anything. So it'll just open and the image will fail to load. But what happens if you're targeting people working from home who've got crappy sort of speed touch routers or sort of BT home hubs without any firewall? This will just basically seamlessly go straight out if they haven't got any no-split VPNs. So although you think you're targeting a really high-profile client that definitely wouldn't work on, it's worth trying it for them remote workers that might not have connected to a no-split VPN. I wrote a blog on it as well and why it's quite bad, so I won't go over it too much. But you don't have to embed it in the email itself. You can also embed it in the document. You can either do this manually. Again, I think I'd go onto this a bit on the blog. Or you can just use the Metasploit module, and it'll actually embed a UNC within the document. I haven't really told you what UNC does, sorry. So for those who don't know, once someone opens on Windows this with a UNC path, it will try and authenticate to that endpoint. And if port 445 is allowed outbound, you'll get the challenge response hash of that user's password. And then you can try and basically attempt to offline brute force that to try and get their password. And then in combination with, say, for example, single-factor systems, you might be able to use that to get into OWA and things like that. OWA has got a vast amount of information usually, and people just leave it on the internet just for ease, really. But once you've done this type of attack, linked with UNC, you can then access loads of information. If you just search for wireless on Outlook Web Access, generally you come back with, oh yeah, this is the Wi-Fi password, it's changed, everyone. Or if you search for password, people just store random passwords in there. Also, like credit card information, just searching for PANs and things like that, you'll find a lot of this information within OWA. And this is without even penetrating, whatever. We'll move on. Without even accessing the inside network. Other things that are often on the internet are things like link. So another good one, if you want to sort of really social engineer someone, once you got onto that single factor system and you can't really get anywhere, you might be able to jump on a link and send them a document to open or send them another attachment because they'll think that it's that person. Also, sending emails from UNC. With UNC, once you've accessed OWA, you can actually send an email then from that user to the rest of the company. And that email is then trusted, so you can add another UNC path and you'll get a lot more shells. So you can even do this via OWA from the internet, but you have to manually intercept it with burp to add the UNC path. So signing macros adds another degree of authenticity. Some examples of what you might send in. So obviously Word 2016, everyone thinks it's new and different. So if you send a document, something like that, that'll say, oh, this was created with a later version than yours, you need to enable content. About 75% of users will just go, yeah, okay, enable content. One I quite like doing is sending a CV. Yeah, hi, I'm after this job, blah, 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 blah. Here's my CV. Having a nice little picture with some encoded text, and then adding an image saying, to enable UK encoding, click enable content. Then once they do that, the image is then reverted back to the proper picture, and they feel warm and fuzzy that something's happened and it worked. So they don't think that anything's nefarious going on in the background. They just think, something's happened, that worked, cool. It must be my PC. Click once applications. So again, these are really good when you're trying to mimic sort of things like Citrix, because by default, you have to have the Citrix receiver installed on your machine. And to do that, that actually installs, either send you off to a link or install something on your machine. So when they see things like install, they're not going to think that's dodgy. They're going to think, oh yeah, that's just normal. Install it, click once, happy days. And if you, again, use a code signing cert, it comes up and it doesn't say anything about red, no, not trusted. So it's just another good way of getting inside an organization. And this is all part of the delivery mechanism. So what I would say is always anonymize your C2 traffic. So if you're doing a real engagement, you're trying to mimic a real threat actor. So you don't want the IP address to come back to Netitude because they'll just be able to do a reverse lookup on the IP and go, oh, that's Netitude, they're doing security testing. You really want to mimic a real threat so that their IR team can work their ass off to try and find out who's trying to hack them and then give a nice report at the end to say what we did. Because that's kind of the real reason we do a red team engagement is to test their defense and response capability. So there's two ways you can anonymize your traffic, well, two ways that I do it. You can either create an IP table rule on some sort of VPSs on the internet, which basically just forward 80 and 443, things like that, to your C2 server. So all the traffic will be going straight to them, but actually in the back end going back to sort of the Netitude range. Or there's some nice Python scripts you can write. One of our guys wrote a nice Python script which basically takes, if it's a normal web request, it'll just take you off to the website. If it's C2 traffic defined by the user agent, then it'll go off to the C2 server. And this helps when you're creating bogus websites because if you do it the other way with just IP tables, it just sends you off to the C2 server. Whereas if you use the Python script, you can actually have it go off to your just normal website, which has got good reputation. So one day in the red teaming world, I sent my CV into the recruitment mailing list of a company. Thinking very pessimistically, I decided to send the attack and go for some coffee. As per usual, this is about 5:30 at night, so I was just about to get off, just about to go to the gym. Less than 5 minutes later, Wendy opened my email. And then she opened the CV, and then she enabled macros. However, the UNC path was blocked, which was fine, that's no problem. I've still got a shell on a machine at this point. However, never fear, because Enterprise Vault was here. So this popped me domain admin credentials sent over UNC. So I was now inside the organization with a foothold with domain admin credentials sent via UNC, which had a trivial password. So it was basically 0 to hero in 5 minutes. And I wanted to go to the gym. At this point, basically, I was inside their organization. I could access their data center. I could laterally move to pretty much anything that was Windows authentication with the domain admin credentials. This really just shows how powerful UNC can be, again, because I didn't think UNC would work, and it didn't on the user that I was intending to attack. However, some random configuration of Enterprise Vault allowed me to get domain admin credentials. So it's just really, really quite strange how things can happen, but always just add all these type of things into your weaponization phase. Things, once I was in, I got access to, I could screenshot her desktop, see that she was on all her emails. When I was searching to find some information, because this was kind of an open objective, they just said they haven't really had this type of pen test done before. They just wanted us to know. They wanted to provide risk to the organization. So I started having a little search around, found HR, payroll data, looked in there for, P60s. No, that can't be all the P60s. Oh, it's password protected PDF, that's fine. I can't get around that. Oh wait, I can, there's John the Ripper, got around that. And then I showed them the CEO's payslip. I've had to redact that, but believe me, she earned a lot of money. So a shell is only the beginning, as Dark Operator would say, and it really is. It's great having 320 shells in an organization, but you've really got to act on your objectives. So once you're in, that's just like the starting point for me. So then I want to actually laterally move, try and act on my objectives and get the crown jewels of the organization. But first, whenever you get inside an organization, you need to do some situational awareness. So don't forget, when you do this type of engagement, you are going in blind. You don't have a clue what you're going to hit and if you're going to hit and what you land on. So you need to be aware of your surroundings. Are you on a desktop? Are you on a VDI, which is a virtual desktop? Are you on a laptop? Is this system joined to a domain, or is it standalone? Because you might be on some guy's laptop at home, which you never really intended to target. So you need to be, quite savvy when you do this type of thing, because it is, you could be breaking the law at this point. You need to ensure what OS language is on. So when I was doing this recently, I was able to escalate privileges, but it took me about an hour and a half when it should have took me about 5 minutes. I was on an Algerian PC. I didn't really take note of this when I was initially on it. And I was basically able to escalate my privileges via service abuse. But I was trying to add my user to the local admin group, and it wouldn't work. And it must have pulled my hair out going, why is it not working? I know I can get escalation of privileges. And because in Algerian or French, administrators is spelt with an EU, so it's administrators. So it basically just, be aware what machine you're on, and little things like that can just hold you up and take about an hour of your life where you didn't need it to. And this is really important before you lay persistence as well, because if that was me and I would have just laid persistence there and then and moved out, then it wouldn't have worked. So things like that is really important. So which brings me on to another little story. So we applied for a job at a company, and at the top of the CV we had a burner phone number which we used before. So a guy called Michael rang the burner phone. So there was 3 of us in our war room, and there was dead silence, and this burner phone rang. So it's the first time we've actually ever had a call into the burner phone. And we were like, oh, what's that? Anyway, I was like, no, you answer it. And he was like, no, you answer it. And then we had a bit of a fight, and I ended up answering it. I was unfortunate one to talk to this guy. Anyway, he rings me and goes, oh, hello, is that, I can't remember what name, he was James. I was like, yeah, it's James. He said, I have your CV and you have an issue. I was like, yeah, basically I couldn't upload it to your website, so I was just wondering if you could upload it for me. And he was like, yeah, no problem. He said, it should be in PDF. I was like, yeah, I know, but I didn't know how to PDF it. He was like, no problem, I can PDF it for you. I was like, great, perfect. I was like, does it show my picture by any chance? He was like, no, I can't see no picture. I was like, okay, no worries. Is there an enable content button by any chance? Yeah, I said, can you click that? Yeah, no problem, click. Yes, we had a shell. I was just so happy at that point. I guess the reason why I'm saying this is when we got in and we actually got a shell, we failed to install persistence. So luckily for us, we had a great guy called Michael. So we tried, on the first instance, we tried to install the persistence within the registry, but because we were on a VDI, and the actual bat file that we uploaded was in the C drive, when he logged in again, with a VDI configuration, you can either have dedicated VDIs or you can have a random VDI, and some VDIs can be destroyed. So when he logged in day 2, we were waiting for a shell at about 9:30, didn't get a shell. We're like, oh, bugger, why not? Couldn't think. Anyway, so the reason was we didn't get a shell is because it was on the VDI. So anyway, we sent him another email saying, oh, hi, Michael. I've updated my CV. I forgot to add that I had this qualification at this date. Oh, no problem here. I'll update it for you. Bang, another shell. Happy days. Anyway, right, we got a nail persistence this time. So we tried installing persistence a second time with a scheduled task. Scheduled task with a bat file again in his local profile. And for some reason, again, we don't really know why this one failed. Come to the second day, 9:30, no shell. No way. We can't use Michael again, surely not. Anyway, Michael, there's a typo in my CV. You couldn't PDF it for me. I think in half an hour went by, now he's not done it. Sorry, Ben, I was a bit late. Here we go, done. Yes, 3rd shell. Anyway, 3rd shell, managed to install persistence properly in the registry. Nothing touched disk when he logged back out and logged back in. Everything persisted fine, and it was great, really. But I just thought I'd share that story because, even if you've been doing this thing a while, you can sort of basically get caught. So it's really, really good to know your surroundings. You guys might not have a guy called Michael who'll just click anything. So here's 4 ways I reliably get persistence. So if you're in as a user, there's the HKCU registry run key, which I often use. This is fingerprinted quite a lot now, so if you're sort of going against carbon black and things like that, you might have to be a bit careful when you're installing persistence. But for the most part, it'll work. And if you've actually managed to escalate privilege to the system, there's a system land version of it as well. What's another way quite good is scheduled task. Again, most times you can run that as a user, but often it is locked down by group policy. Again, if you can escalate privileges on the machine to install persistence, you can get a system level service, which is in system land. One of the most stealthy ways that I find is WMI. So Matt Graber did something on this. I think it was about 9-10 months ago now. You can create an on-startup WMI event, which is really stealthy. Not many systems would pick this up at all. So if stealth's your approach, then that's the way to go, really. One thing to be aware of, again, is proxy aware. I know I keep going on about this, but it's really, really important. So if you've escalated your privilege to system, you've got to remember that the user you're logged in as, before you've got to system, would have proxy aware sort of credentials. So he would be allowed to go through the proxy. System isn't a user domain, a domain user. So system wouldn't be able to traverse out the proxy. So when you're creating your payloads, if you're using stuff like Metasploit or whatever you want to use to get out, you need to make sure that can support proxy credentials and the proxy URL, because system won't be able to find that out for you. So this is another way which we failed before, is by just installing it, thinking system will get out, and it won't. So just be aware that if you escalate privileges and you're installing system level persistence, make sure you add your proxy details. So other post-exploitation techniques I use a lot is sort of cred logging and cred popping. So the main goal of a red teaming engagement is to get to the critical assets or applications, and often inside a bank or something like that, it'll be on Oracle, so your credentials that you might have got during the Windows phase would not work on the Oracle stuff. So the way I generally do this is by basically, if the guy that I've got onto is opening the application that I want to access, the banking application, I'll often just kill the process and wait for him to log back in using a keylogger, and that way then I've got the credentials I need to actually move on to the application. So this is an example, a real-world application using PowerShell keylogger. Basically, I was able to see him go onto the banking suite, enter his username and enter his password. I was then able to laterally move to another machine with Citrix and log straight into that banking application. So which brings me on to another little story. So we approached a guy called Andrew. Andrew was a network specialist who may or may not have been looking to leave his current role, and we found that his CV was already out there on the internet. So we basically got in touch with this guy over social media and slightly oversold him a role. The new IT role was working from home, great salaries, 15% pension, private healthcare, everything. We literally just sold. I was on the phone for about an hour and a half. This recruitment like is really easy. I don't know why I don't go into that, to be honest. All I needed him to do was visit a website and digitally sign my agreement in principle. So I said, before I can work on your behalf, I need you to visit this website so that so that I don't do anything naughty, and I'm bound by UK law. So I got him to put his full name in, his email, which is a digital signature apparently, and it says, I agree that this contract shall be governed by UK law. So he thought this was all good. Yeah, no problem. I'll do that for you now, Ben. And because I said it was all anonymised and nothing sort of showed any recruitment sort of logos or anything, he did this on his work PC, which was exactly what I wanted, basically. So this popped up a Java applet, and he clicked run. Happy days, I got my shell. So Michael may or may not have sent me some very, very harsh messages after this, because he found out about what we did. So because so much so, when I got on his machine, he actually must have gone home and told his wife about this and everything, that he'd got a new job, potentially. He was searching to get out his home office, so he was searching for chairs and curries. He was looking to buy a printer, and I did kind of feel quite bad at this point. But he had the key to the kingdom. He was pretty much on any firewall, switch, and router within the organization. So I didn't have to move. So like what I was saying back at the start, I picked the right guy to target. I didn't have to do any lateral movement, so it was fairly easy. Could have been worse. I could have been my mate who decided to put this as his LinkedIn profile. Could have broke his marriage up, but I didn't. So it can always be worse. So lateral movement. So lateral movement's a key point in the cyber kill chain, and it's where you would act on your objectives. So I've talked about MSF quite a bit. The SOX proxy capabilities in MSF is pretty awesome. It allows you to sort of proxy change any of your tools in Windows or Linux through that initial shell. There's another way you can do it as well with CNTLM and SSH proxy server, but it's not quite as cute as Metasploit. Or another way you can laterally move is using WMI and WinRM within Windows. So Citrix servers are often a great target. So when I get on my initial foothold inside the laptop or desktop, the way I often try and escalate privileges is either on the machine itself, which sometimes is all locked down fairly well, or often going to the Citrix servers. So once I've got in with Powershell C2, then I'll install Metasploit to use the SOX proxy capabilities, and then I'll access the Citrix server. Once on the Citrix server, sorry, I'm going a bit ahead. I'll get onto that after. So this is the SOX proxy capabilities in the Metasploit. It allows you to use any of your normal tools. So you can just use Medusa, Nmap, RDP, SMB map. So all these tools you can use just because proxy change allows it to go through Metasploit. So it is a great way of being able to laterally move once you've got your initial foothold within Metasploit. Sometimes it's really quite easy because people just have a nice passwords.doc file which has got all their passwords, even for National Lottery. But what I was saying before was going back to lateral movement and Citrix. So this is an example. So I actually use the SOX proxy server to RDP my connection onto Citrix. Once I was on Citrix, I could access all the banking applications. But what I wanted to do was just escalate privileges at this point. So I was able to basically use the Windows Explorer to navigate to PowerShell, open PowerShell, Because I know Citrix servers are used all the time, people tend not to reboot them. So obviously for that note, they're probably not patched. So I use MS1632, which is one of the latest privilege escalation vulnerabilities. So it allowed me to go from nothing to system. When I was on a system, obviously you can dump the clear text passwords out of memory, of which I did, which was quite ironic because the password was suck it red team. At this point, this guy that I got the password for was DA. I was able then to laterally move to the domain controller, add users just for an IR sort of case, access other Citrix applications. I was able to even log into basically the money place where you can approve and reject payments from one system to another. I was able to download all their PDF copies of all their agreements. Again, access the banking information. Another one, which is quite interesting, is the database stuff. So sometimes they might have Imperva, which logs database connections to and from a client and server. But what's quite interesting, if you RDP onto the server, then access it via the MSSQL management agent, that isn't logged within Imperva. So that's just another way to think about it. If you're being quite stealthy and don't want to get caught, that's a good way to access the database. So all that is kind of how I would do a red teaming engagement, and that's kind of how we built a tool. So to start with, I created a wiki which had basically all these different tasks that I would do with all these different tools, and I thought, well, why don't I just create our own off the back of what we did within PowerShell and Metasploit. So we created something called Powershell C2, me and Dave Hardy. So there's 12 reasons that I think you should probably have a look at Powershell C2. It's maintained, free, and open source. It's inspired by, imported by the MSF stuff we did back in April last year. It's a great way of learning PowerShell in a phased approach. So it doesn't just chuck you in the deep end of learning PowerShell, like you've got to know PowerShell. You can just run known modules and commandlets. So it is quite easy, like Metasploit. But also it allows you to get quite dirty in PowerShell if you want to. So you can write your own modules and add them. It all uses AES encrypted communications. We've added an auto kill switch, so it just reduces the risks to an organization. So if you're going to do this type of engagement, they might be worried that, oh, but what happens in 4 weeks and you've still got a shell? It's like, well, no, we won't, because we'll have a kill date of 2 weeks. Anything after that date will automatically get killed. So it just reduces the risk a little bit, and they're probably more likely to go for a red teaming engagement. It's not only red teaming, you can use it on pen testing engagement. So I use it quite often now, because if you're using PowerShell, you don't have to think about removing anything. It's just all in memory. Simple to use, and it's really easy to install. It'll create you a Java payload, so it only requires Java JDK if you want it to do that part of it, but it's not essential if you don't want to. It works on anything from PowerShell version 2 and above, which is Windows 7, 8, 10, 2008, 2012, and plus. It's fully proxy aware, so that's one of the main things. I've tested it on quite a few things now, like Squid, TMG, WebSense, and Palo Alto, and it all works perfectly. It's based on customizable HTTP beacons, so it's not a continuous TTP stream, so you can set the beacon to be 60 seconds, 5 minutes, 2 hours, anything like that. And it's got also a jitter of 10%. So if they're looking on their firewall for everything beaconing at 60 seconds exactly, this will actually add 10% jitter to counteract that. So it's maintainable, modular, and can be added in the middle of engagement. So it's got a folder called modules. So if you write your own PowerShell and you want to just add a module quickly on the fly to run it on the engagement, you can just drop it into the modules folder, load module, and away to go. From a communications perspective, we've tested it against FireEye, Palo Alto, and WebSense. We've added some image heuristics. So actually, if you take the traffic from the C2 going back and forth, all you'll see is a load of PNG images flying back and forth. All the data is an encrypted byte stream within an image. So it's actually quite hard to reverse and get the data back out. So it just looks like images, basically. So it's quite good from that point of view. And then one of the most important things for us is the detailed output you get. So when you do this type of engagement, you need to be really sort of time sensitive. So you need to say exactly what you've done and when you've done it. So at the end of the engagement, you can go to their IR. They provided a report to say this is what we saw, and you need to be able to collaborate with yours and say no, we didn't get a foothold, then we got it here, and then so just a synchronized time source and time stamping of everything you've done is really important. I'll show you a demo of that after, but that's one of the main things why we wrote this, and it puts it in a nice HTML file. Oh, sorry. Puts it in a nice HTML file so you can provide it to the customer after as well. So I was going to do a live demo, but that went horribly wrong, so I've got a video. I'll skip the installation because we haven't got much time. So once you've installed it, basically this is how it looks. You wouldn't use an IP address usually at the top. It'll give you 5 options. You would use the URL or DNS name that you've configured for your C2 server. It's going to run quite quick because we haven't got much time. But basically this is me getting a shell on a bank. This is a fake bank that I've created. Oh, sorry. Not better. No, I can't see it. Yeah, so basically this is me getting a shell on a fake bank. This is how the implant comes in. It shows you the encrypted key that everything's encrypted with. It's all stored in an SQL-like database. You can then, on the left-hand side, it opens 2 windows. So the left-hand side is where all the output goes. The right-hand side is where you input the commands. So get screenshots just run a normal function. Basically, it'll just do a normal print screen of the desktop that you've compromised. You can run things like who am I? What's this? Can't even read it now. Oh yeah, just net users, net local group administrators. These are just general commands that you'd be able to run. So it's like a command line interface. This is beaconing over 5 seconds. You can set it to 2 seconds, 1 second, or 2 minutes. So that'll be quite stealthy. But for this, I wanted to be quite quick. So the main aim of this one, I think. I've skipped the installation, so this basically just attempts to escalate privileges using an MS1632. So MS1632 is out there. We've just incorporated it into Powershell C2. So this hopefully will show me doing that now. Start another implant. That's just another way of getting another implant. So once you've got one, again, you don't want that to die or to time out. So you always do start another implant. It gives you a backup one. It's all quite interactive. It's got a helpline. So just type help. It's literally two PowerShell scripts. So it's all readable. You can edit it. It's got a modules folder. It's fairly modular. This is all the modules that we've put in. I haven't written all these, by the way. These are all just the decent scripts that are out there and commandlets that are already out there by sort of Harmjoy and Matt Graeber. And so I've wrote a few of the functions like get proxy because this is some of the things that I'd want to do when I'm on an engagement. But it's basically just running a registry command at the background. Everything as well, so everything that I've written, like get proxy, it tells you exactly what the command is, because I want it to be quite transparent. I want you to learn how to use PowerShell as well. So CredPop is a good one. So that basically pops up a screen on the desktop saying Outlook requires your credentials. So to do anything, usually you need to have credentials. And I don't know how many times my machine asks me that, so it's not something that wouldn't be familiar to the person. Everything that you put in, so like the screenshots, will be in here. So this is just an example. So this is the screenshot of the desktop that I've actually managed to capture. You can actually sit there just doing screenshots. And often it's quite good just to sit there watching what the person does, because they're the person who knows how to use this banking application. I'm here coming in as an outsider wanting to use the application. I have no idea. Just sitting there watching is often a really good way of sort of learning how to use the application. So creating a proxy payload, so everything, like I said, is proxy aware, but you need to be able to tell it what the proxy credentials are. So I'm escalating privilege now to system. As I said before, system wouldn't know how to get out. So what you've got to do is create a proxy payload and tell it what the URL is, which obviously the URL I found out from the registry, and I've got the credentials now. So now I can create my proxy aware payload, and then hopefully exploit MS1632. So instead of touching disk, I've introduced something recently, which is named pipes. So in PowerShell, especially in the exploit world, where MS1632 works, it's a race condition and starts a new process. You're only allowed 1024 bits. Well, when you create a PowerShell proxy payload that's bigger than that, so the way I've done it is set up a named pipe. So that's exactly what it's doing now. So it sets up a local named pipe in PowerShell, and then it gets the data from the named pipe, and that's allowed me to get it less than 1024 bytes. So that's what it's doing on the left now, hopefully. I won't keep you much longer. Coffee's on the rise. So it'll automatically load the modules as well if it knows about the module. So if you add one, it won't automatically load it. So you can just click load module and then, I don't know, powerview.ps1 or whatever. And there we go, we've got our system shell there. So now I can use it, go back up here, see all my implants on the right, who am I, and it should then come over here and tell me I'm system. Yeah, bang, system. So that's me escalating privileges all through a firewall, laterally moving, and proxy aware system. Is that gone? Yeah. So this is created by me and Dave Hardy, as I said. We want to create more integrated payload methods like HDA and click once. We want to create a daisy chain method so that once you're inside an organization, not every machine has to connect out. It can all connect out via the first pivot, basically. Implement process migration, which we've already done now, so you can actually migrate to other processes. I want to add more modules like capturing traffic, auto-completes, and things like that. Feel free to do pull requests. It's all on GitHub and on the labs.netu website, so have a look. Feel free to hit me up. Just quickly, this is the logging. Basically, this is how it outputs. It outputs 2 files. It tells you exactly what implants you've got and what host they're on and when you got them and when it last communicated. And it also tells you exactly what time you ran each command and the output of each command. So it's great for like a red team versus blue team. So thank you very much.